Before we start, I'd like to take the opportunity today and raise my glass and wish a happy birthday to founder and team leader of our organization, Slovenian Global Business Network, Dr. Stefan Bogdan Barem-Bonšale. May you be blessed with health, wealth, and happiness. Congratulations on your holiday today. Cheers! Vse najboljše za vaš praznik, gospod. Na zdravje.
Zdravje, drugič bomo za to malo popili tudi, ne?
Z vodo.
Da se dobimo. Najlepša hvala.
Good afternoon and welcome to our 6th virtual meeting of Slovenian businesswomen around the globe, where we host on a monthly basis Slovenian entrepreneurs, executives, family business leaders from all over the world and from Slovenia. At these meetings, they share their experiences and challenges when doing business in Slovenia and around the world. Thank you all for joining us from all over the world. We're very happy to have you here. And today our special guest is a Slovenian, currently living and working in the tropical part of Norway, city called Stavanger. We welcome Ms. Eva AVBELJ, a reservoir and chemical engineer of one of the largest independent European gas and oil companies. Skilled and responsible in simulation software, management and control of oil and gas reservoir. Graduated as top of the class at the University of Aberdeen in UK, where she finished her master's in science in reservoir engineering. And at the University of Leeds in UK, EVA assisted with PhD level research by performing laboratory analysis of biogeochemical samples, archaeal, and biomarker extractions. The work involved using samples that were hard to acquire and could not be reused, so careful planning and flawless execution were necessary. Eva is interested in digitalization, projects, carbon capture storage, and enjoys designing a better method for solving complex task problems and learning new technologies and tools when the need arises. We know that today's topic is not necessarily the main field of Slovenian industry, as we know that Slovenia has essentially no natural gas or oil reserves or production, mainly imports from other countries, but it's still the essential source globally. In the first part of our meeting, we will talk about the big choices for oil and gas in navigating the energy transition. As oil and gas companies respond to current economic discontinuities, they should choose where and how to compete in global transition to a low carbon future. Challenges as a woman working on the field of oil and gas. And in the second part of our meeting, we will discuss on promoting Slovenian language as the main initiator for adding Slovene language in Duolingo application. And the future plans eventually returning back to Slovenia, owning a winery and her great passion for wine. Between the first and the second part, and on the end of our discussion, we'll give you the opportunity to interact with our guest. So make a note of any questions or comments, and we'll let you know when to ask. So now I'd like to pass the floor to Eva. And maybe we start with your studying experiences in Slovenia, Scotland, and UK. So please, Eva, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much for introduction and kind words, Mateja. Also to Stefan, Mr. Stefan, I wish happy birthday, kolikor kapljic toliko let. For me, it's a great pleasure and also honor to be invited to this Slovenian Global Business Network event. So I'm very much looking forward to our interview, and I'm also very much looking forward to the questions from everyone who decided to join today. So thank you for having me. And then I will just start with a short introduction, how I ended up where I ended up. So initially, I was not really specifically interested in the oil and gas industry as such, but I somehow ended up here. As Matea has mentioned, I have first started studying chemical engineering at the University of Ljubljana. And there I completed my thesis that had nothing to do with the oil and gas. In fact, it had to do with the lithium-ion batteries that are used in the electric cars. After completing my thesis, that was the time of this economic crisis in Slovenia. So I decided to basically try my luck abroad. So after graduating in Ljubljana, I moved to the UK and started working at the University of Leeds in the research lab. After a year, I decided to do another master's degree. And immediately afterwards, I was very lucky to get an opportunity in this German multinational company that I work for, which I still work today after 6 years. It's been also at the time when I finished studying, there was an oil and gas crisis. So I kind of have a talent to find a crisis and start when I entered the workforce. There was over 1,000 applicants for my position, so I was very lucky to get that. So I came across this oil and gas because I get to know people, let's say a professor in England who worked in this industry. And he said it's a very special industry, and this kind of attracted me at that point. It's, let's say, special because in a sense that it operates with very advanced technologies. So we're working offshore, we're drilling wells that are over 10 kilometers deep in the middle of the sea. We're using subsea robots and we are using drones as well. Let's say that's one aspect. The other is a social aspect. So I work with people that are very international, and I like this a lot. And I also get to travel a lot. So it's not uncommon, for example, when I go for lunch with my colleagues, that we are all from different countries, that none of them is of the same nationality. I would say that this gives you a very good perspective of different points of view and also a degree of cultural differences between us. I think that over these years that I worked abroad, I became more tolerant, and I'm also perhaps more aware of my perspective and my points of view, that they are defined by the country, the culture, and the language where I come from, that I grew up with, rather by my choice, let's say, and my free will. Growing up in Slovenia, I would say that I took many things for granted. And also the way that I go about work and how I approach problems is different to my colleagues. At the last event, Ria made a very nice comparison in the last session in the way USA and Slovenia is different, because she grew up in both countries and she had experience of these two educational systems. And I perhaps noticed difference not between USA and Slovenia, but between Slovenia and the different countries in Western Europe, so UK, Germany, in Norway, where I worked, but also all the differences between different colleagues that I have. So they're from everywhere, from Russia, Libya, Brazil as well, South America, Argentina, yeah, everywhere. So what do I do now? As I mentioned, I've been working as a reservoir engineer for almost 6 years now. So as mentioned, I work for a German international oil and gas company that is present in Europe, Middle East, Russia as well. And in South America, we're present in Brazil, Argentina, and Mexico. So during the first years, I was undergoing training on 3 different locations. These were 2 locations in Germany. So one in headquarters, the other is on the field side in the south, and then also in Norway. So when I became, let's say, a proper, let's say, not just a junior, but a reservoir engineer, I started working for the Libyan department. So I worked with the Libyan colleagues, but because of the security situation, so the civil war that is ongoing there, I was working from the headquarters in Germany. For the last 3 years, I have moved to Norway and I'm staying there for another year. My daily responsibilities include, reservoir engineer is maybe not something that is very self-explanatory, like if you say if you're a doctor. So what I'm actually doing, so I'm I'm basically doing oil reservoir management. This means I plan operations on an oil field. For example, I run 3D simulations, and based on these simulations, we decide, for example, how many wells we're going to drill, what is our strategy to deplete the reservoir, what are going to be the rates. I'm also responsible for reporting how much hydrocarbons are still left in the reservoirs. And this is then further communicated to the headquarters of the company so that to prepare the business plan. And we communicate that also to the country's authority. In this case, that's Norway. So Ministry of Petroleum Energy. So this is an important and responsible task because our business decisions are dependent on this evaluation. And it also affects the company evaluation. So in the last case. My job in Norway is based in the office. However, in the training period, I was also working onshore at the well site.
You mentioned Brazil. Do you ever see yourself going on that field as well?
In Brazil? Yeah, we have just started. So there's been a few years ago that we opened an office in Brazil and then we left and now we restarted again. I think this time we're going to stay for a long time. I think I would love going to Brazil. We have an office in Rio de Janeiro and I think it's a very exciting city to be in. And yeah, I have to say I envy the weather 365 days a year. So coming from Norway.
Eva, you're most welcome to come here. So as you mentioned, working on the platform, technicians works on platform, right? And engineers in the office. To work on the platform requires a specific course on kind of self-rescue in need of a helicopter crash. Were you ever interested to do this kind of course and try to join them on the platform?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so because the offshore, so working on the oil platform is very, let's say, there are certain safety measurements that have to be obeyed, and this requires a certain course. So there's drilling engineers are usually there, but reservoir engineers that are basically tasked for long-term planning are usually not there. I did, that was my phone. Sorry, I hope that was not too loud. Yeah, so the course looks like this. I have done it as a student, but I haven't done the theoretical part. So it looks like this, that it's done in a swimming pool. So they make like a fake helicopter, it's just a hull. And you go there with your 6 colleagues. And in the first stage, you're just submerged into the swimming pool. At the second stage, you're submerged very fast. And on the third time, they submerge you fast and turn you upside down. And then in that time, you have to unbuckle your seatbelt and swim out. And for me, this was kind of fun. But we also had some colleagues that we didn't know how to swim. So you have a safety belt. So you don't have to know how to swim. But then you feel a bit uncomfortable if you don't know how to swim and you have the head under the water. Yeah.
So it's not the experience that you would like to have.
For sure, not in real life. This for sure I have to say, but usually they have quite a good record. So it happens every so often, every second or third year that the helicopter falls. And if people survive the impact, usually they survive because they're trained. That they survive, yeah, but you have in this, I think you have 15 minutes in the North Sea because it's so cold.
And Eva, we go a little bit to COVID crisis has resulted in a material near-term drop in global energy demand at one point, leading to almost 30% reduction. Yet this was not the biggest threat to oil and gas industry faces. But how was your work impact during the COVID-19?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for me, because we're very, let's say, digitalized already industry, we're quite, let's say, relatively progressive now, maybe compared to some others, that we just moved and worked from home. So we took our laptops and continued to work there. if there was drilling going on. Anyway, I'm following it from the computer screen, and it doesn't really matter if I do it from the office or if I do it from home. So from that point of view, it didn't really have a big impact on me. On the other hand, there was a big price drop. So at one point in time, I think last year in April, they were selling this WTI crude in the US for negative price, which means that if you would come and ask for oil, you would give it, and they would give it, they would even pay for you. So that was for some time. Because Norway is so dependent on the oil and gas production, this is basically where the prosperity comes from. The government stepped in and they decided to basically give some tax relief on the projects. So they defined a certain date and they said, okay, if you submit a project until that date, you can get the tax refund earlier. And it was quite a, let's say, thorough package that maybe someone working in the finance can explain a bit better. But this basically changed a lot for us, and there were even more projects going on than before. So because of this government intervention, for us, it wasn't that bad. Because it happens, because the oil price goes up and down, that there is massive, they release a lot of people at the same time, and it also has an impact on their currency and so on. So they're very thoughtful about it. Probably it was a different case in other countries.
Okay, there are many challenges on this industry. So as we call it, Greta Thunberg effect. The generation gap between older and younger compared to the oil industry. And Norway's big future plan, how to track young students to return with studies on that field. What is the big plan?
Yeah, maybe I say something about Greta Thunberg. First, I admire her a lot because she stands for her principles, and she had such a big effect. And this is, let's say, an underage girl that made such a big impact. However, I would say in our world, we have maybe two challenges. The first one, probably most important, is the environmental crisis. And the second one is that the demand for the energy is growing. Not necessarily for fossil fuel energy, but for the energy, it's growing. So these are kind of it's a balancing act, I would say. However, these environmental aspects have a lot of impact in the whole Scandinavia, so in Sweden, in Norway, and this actually, it happened that young people stopped going to the university to study oil and gas business, and this is a big deal for Norway, because you cannot run the industry without the young people going. So what a few companies started is to basically attract some young employees, one of them was my colleague, to go to schools and to basically present what they're doing and why this is, let's say, a balancing act. And they were also invited to the companies, to the oil and gas companies, to present what they're doing. So it's basically to raise awareness, what is the role of oil and gas and what should it be in the future. And my colleague said that the kids were posing more difficult questions than the grown-ups in the oil and gas companies. Yeah.
The question isn't how the grown-up responds.
Yeah, sorry?
So the kids, you mentioned that the kids put the complicated questions. So how they react, how is the grown-up reaction? How they try to convince with this?
Okay. Yeah. So for the kids that, or let's say young adults that are deciding to study, for them it's also a moral question. While the adults that already work in the oil and gas company probably had to come to already a certain compromise because they want to provide for their family, and maybe they're not. Let's say that the younger they are, the more idealistic people are, and they're not willing to make compromises, and that's not a bad thing, I would say. There was a really interesting interview with the father of Greta Thunberg, and he said that he didn't really stop because his daughter made both of them stop flying and stop traveling. And he said that for him, this wasn't he didn't stop traveling honestly because of the environmental issues, but it's because of his daughter that really stopped speaking and stopped eating. And he just wanted his daughter to get better, and that's why he stopped traveling. I think maybe adults are more pragmatic, more pragmatic, less idealistic.
Yeah, with or trying to secure or protect their own kids. But let's go to carbon neutral. Slovenia generated almost 70% of its electricity with zero carbon or carbon neutral sources in 2019, dominated by, of course, nuclear power and hydroelectricity. Norway's neighbor country, Denmark, has cancelled all upcoming North Sea licensing rounds in anticipation of ending oil and gas production in the North Sea by year 2050. And Norway is a green country, as we know, and one of the main world oil and gas industry. How are they contributing to the planet Earth? What are the main plans?
Yeah, maybe I first comment a bit on this policy of the Denmark. So they decided to not offer any license for oil and gas production. However, oil and gas in Denmark is not a really important industry, and it's not contributing to such a big extent as in Norway, where everything is basically based on the oil and gas. There's very little under industry. So let's say fishing is also very important, but then it's oil and gas first, most important. So this question is a bit more difficult for Norwegians than for people from Denmark. Nevertheless, I would say that Norway has decided still to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by a large percent. Their entire electricity comes from hydropower. So everything they put on electricity, nothing comes from, if it comes from Norway, it doesn't come from coal or any fossil fuel, it comes from their hydro plants. And they built them before they found oil and gas, and that was probably a good thing. They've decided to reduce their greenhouse gas emission by at least 40% by, I think, in 10 years' time. And they plan to do that by electrifying a lot of projects and also by investing into emissions reduction projects abroad. And they should be zero emission by 2050. What they're also very known for is that they're selling a lot of electric cars. I think they're top in the world. So you see a lot of Teslas there when you just walk around in Norway. And I think they have, so I think it was the over 70% that the newly registered cars are electric plug-in vehicles. This they're doing by having lots of subsidies. So before, if you owned an electric car, you could drive on the bus lane. You didn't have to pay for any tolls that are very high in Norway. So that's how they planned to basically change from fossil fuel to have a bit more electrified. Other countries it's a bit more complicated because if the electricity comes from, let's say, coal plants, you didn't do anything good if you're electrifying your industry. No.
So we're gonna open now the chat box or questions or comments in case if anyone wants to ask Eva about the first part of the conversation we had. Please do now, because we're gonna continue with the second part of this program. Alexandri Gerki raised his hand.
Yeah, I would like to ask if it is a reality that oil and gas industry is facing troubles on hiring younger people due to environmental reasons. Do you see this happening already?
Okay, so you mean it's that this young people's protest, that it had such an impact that it would basically hinder the oil and gas industry in terms of exploration or producing? Is this what you're asking?
I'm asking more in a generic way if the oil and gas the companies that actuates in this business, if they are seeing this, if they are seeing that we are not interesting for young people. Younger people wants to work with something that is not related to oil and gas. I never heard about that. And yeah, is this happening?
I cannot say for all the countries. I can say for Norway, that was a big drop in young people applying. There was, I mean, before it was kind of a dream job. You had generation of 30 people or something like that. And then this dropped to less than 10. So that was a big issue in Norway. I think it kind of improved, but it's not gonna get to a different level. And I don't think it makes sense to come to a different level. There was also, now I remember, at Imperial College in London, they discontinued one of the oil and gas courses as well. So yes, this is happening for sure. Not so in, no, I know in UK and Norway, probably somewhere else as well. Also oil and gas industry, I mean, the industries as such. So for example, if you know Statoil, it was the Norwegian oil and gas company. They have changed the name now to Equinor, which means, let's say, equilibrium of Norway. So they plan to basically change the portfolio in such a way that they're going to have a lot of wind projects. So they're going to be like a wholesome energy company. So they're not going to be fossil fuel company, but they're going to provide electricity coming from the wind. I think the French Total is investing a lot in solar. There's a lot of carbon capture storage projects that you basically cannot follow up anymore because there's so many. Some are investing in hydropower. There is a cases of companies that they change their portfolio in 2 years from going completely fossil fuel to becoming really green, like totally green, like very few years. It's maybe an exception, no, it's not. But in general, all these oil and gas companies are, I would say, international independent oil and gas companies are converting into energy companies that are not based completely on this fossil fuel. Or maybe also this hydrogen is a big question also. It's not really clear where it's going to go. So the companies have to kind of place their bets and put it either on this or that or make a whole portfolio. So I think we know that this is coming. We don't know how fast it's coming, and we don't know what's going to be the winning strategy. It's probably going to be a mix. About the national oil companies, for example, this is probably a slower transition, I would say. Yeah. Did I answer your question, or I kind of went off?
Mr. Shale and Mrs. Shale, they raised their hand, but just before I give them the floor, I just want to ask the question that we were supposed to talk about it before, is that Carmen Spilak is asking, what are some of today's biggest challenges for women working in their fields?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, there is quite a few challenges, but they don't really, so partially they come from the oil and gas, and partially they come from the country where you're working in. So when I would say, so I can talk about the countries that I worked in. In Germany, it's very, I would say it's more conservative country that
Unmute yourself.
Unmute, sorry.
Go on from Germany, conservative.
Yeah, so Germany, so it's a more conservative society where the roles of men and women are more split. So you don't really see that many German women engineers. And when I was working in the headquarters, I was the only woman there. When I was on the field, they had to invent a new toilet for me because I was also the only woman there. And I got the uniform that was the size of 46 instead of 36 because they didn't have any others. There's coming from, let's say, from some other cultures where it's more used to that the woman stays at home and takes care of the kids. You are being judged as someone that you shouldn't perhaps be there and that you have some other things to do. So it's always a bit of a balancing act to find the people that don't think like that. And you basically search yourself a mentor and try to basically avoid any kind of judgment as much as you can. Of course, so when you work for the Libya, there is going to be people that they're not going to shake your hands and they're not going to talk to you directly, let's say. And this is, yeah, I cannot imagine being a woman living there. It's, yeah.
You have, how many women works on your company in Norway?
In Norway, there's a lot of women, so we have 30% of women.
30%.
That's considered a lot, of course, yeah.
Okay. I'm going to give the word to Ms. Deborah Barenboim, please.
Hello. This is so interesting. I'm curious. I'd like to know, what is your typical working day? What do you do on a daily basis? You get there to your job and then what? What is it that you actually do?
Yeah, so basically I go to the office like many other people, switch on the laptop, and then I have two screens. And for example, first I check the reports from the fields. So basically, what was the production? Was it something that was expected, or it wasn't something that was expected? We usually have plans what to do in the future. So this is not something that happens next week, but usually happens next year, so you have a lot of time to plan these things. So I basically open some some software where I have the 3D model of my reservoir, and I have, let's say, some wells, and then I simulate with the software based on different scenarios. So for example, if I produce with the rate of, let's say, 4,000 cubic meters per day, how much oil will I get? What if I have a pressure support, let's say water injector? Is this a better strategy? So I just go through a lot of different scenarios, and I have to also include a lot of different uncertainties because we don't really know what's there. We cannot go and see it. So based on that, I propose the best strategy, and then it's up to the management to support this strategy, and we decide to invest and go for it. Yeah.
In case if it rises up, what happens? I'm sorry, the question, but if you strategy, if you calculate it, but then drilling and it comes more, what happens?
Yeah, that's always a challenge, and it happens. It's very rare that it's exactly what you think. It's either more or it's less. So if it's less, it's of course a problem because there's less so you invested into a project that it's not going to be so profitable. But if it's within a certain range, we always define like P10, P50, P90 ranges. So as long as it's within the range, it's okay. If it's too big, it's also a problem because you design the facilities. So you have a separator of the oil and it's based on a certain rate. And if you have much more, you just cannot produce because you're limited by this facility. So you have to be quite, let's say, realistic. But as said, it's very common that something is not as you plan, and then you always have to adjust these plans and do amendments. And you basically always also scale the facilities in such a way that you are basically taking care of that. You always have a bit more capacity just in case it's bigger. So you're not choked by the surface facilities.
Okay, Mr. Shale, please.
Thank you very much. Congratulations. And you are living in very nice country, which is besides oil and gas, very advanced in all other technology. And especially it's very interesting case how they developed the wealth fund, sovereign wealth fund, how they manage all the income from oil and gas, this wellness, and how as a state manage it well. I think this is one very important thing when we are talking about Norway. The second point is when you mentioned a very important point. We cannot have a look just in oil and gas as separate from all the energy sources and the management of the so-called energy matrix by the countries and the country decisions how to use and which sources they will use better in energy. Now we are facing in Slovenia the case that some lobbies in the past forced the coal industry solution in energy, which nowadays has become let's say, a problematic one with all the corruption as well and so on. And now another lobby is forcing the Slovenia to go to the nuclear energy. These discussions are all around the world. So it's not over. How we will develop in the next 20, 30 years, as Carmen, our dear friend Carmen Špiljak, ask in the chat, what will happen in the next 30 years? We are not developing what is going now today, but what will be and how we develop in the next 20, 30 years, all the sources of energy, which is not even discovered, because let's say the discovery of nuclear energy or oil, this is, let's say, the energy which was discovered in the past century, so over 100 years ago, or more than 100 years ago. But my question is basically how you are, because we promote the Slovenia Global Business Network, we promote the relationship between the Slovenian business people around the world. Do you have any relationship with other Slovenes around the world? Do you have any cooperation? I heard a lot. You are very, very active in Slovenian community around the world. You try. We will discuss this. They use the language, Duolingo, and so on. But what is your experience working with Slovenia? Because we. Privately, we used to work in our organization Slovencu nivo, je partner, je prijatelj. So we are not wolf to each other. We have not compete with other Slovenes, we cooperate with other Slovenes. What was your experience in this field? Thank you very much. And once again, thank you very much not to participating for your very outstanding professional, personal achievements. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefan, for your kind words. I'm happy that I have this lightning, so you don't see I'm blushing now. Yeah, maybe, so thank you first for the comments. They're like both really relevant. And I will maybe first comment on the comment and then I will ask your question, answer your question. So first about this wealth fund in Norway. So if, I don't know if someone doesn't know, the oil and gas is very heavily taxed in Norway. And this money from the tax from the oil and gas production goes to the wealth fund. And there is very strict rules how to, what happens with this money. It's not allowed to invest in oil and gas. It's not allowed even, I think, to invest in any ethical, in any industry that is ethically not acceptable. It's, I think it's allowed to invest outside of Europe. And the Norwegians are so transparent that if you come to visit me in Stavanger, there is a museum of oil and gas, and you can just go and see how this wealth fund works. And you can just check where did they invest. So you can just go, they invested a lot in New York, and you can just, let's say, virtually go through the city and see what is owned by the oil wealth fund. It's all very transparent. And this is such a big, should be such a big lesson to every country, because I think it's really an exception. If I look at Libya, they could look exactly the same as Norway, but they have a completely different. It's a tragedy what happened there. Then Netherlands was a complete crisis because they depended so much on oil and gas, they forget completely about their industry. And then when the oil price drops, everything kind of collapsed. Now they're kind of getting better. But this is really how they made such a good system that corrupting this money is not really possible. And it's about the system. It's not about having corrupt or non-corrupt politicians. It's about the system, and you cannot touch this. And every time there is a crisis, I think there is let's say a talk, and it's always a big issue. Are they going to open this fund? Because currently they're just accumulating more and more money, and they're using just on the top of the percentage of what they had. So I would just really like to I don't know, develop this idea further. I really like this idea, what Norway just did. What was the second comment, Stefan, if you can remember, about the Slovenes? What was the second comment?
The comment was how you are, what's your relationship with other Slovenian people around the world? Do you have any contact? Do you cooperate or not?
With Slovenes. Yeah, I didn't really cooperate that much until recently because I was studying in the UK, and then that's where my contacts were. But recently I made a short interview for the newspaper Finance, and it was on the topic basically about my work life. And also I mentioned that in Slovenia we have some gas reservoirs, and quite a few of them are depleted. And this basically also represents an opportunity. So the first opportunity would be to use them as a storage for natural gas. So in case the price goes up, like now, for example, where it's very, very pricey, the gas so the point is to buy it when the price is low, inject it into these depleted reservoirs, and during the heating season, you basically reuse them. But this doesn't have any, we don't have any such projects, so we're just importing this gas at the prices that are probably higher. Another topic is carbon capture storage. So as you know, now we have this carbon pricing. So if we're going to, for example, that we have quite some industries, for example, Tesh and Cementarne, so for the cement companies, they're emitting a lot of CO2. So when the price of emitting CO2 is going to be very high, these are going, they're not going to be profitable anymore if we don't offset the CO2 in such a way. So there are some plans about carbon capture storage. I have been contacted by Marko Mavar. He is involved in this topic. So it's basically a project called CCS for so carbon capture storage for Central and Eastern European Union. So this is basically the fund also by funded by Norway to start these projects in Central and Eastern European Union, and also in Slovenia. So we are in connection with him. This cooperation goes to a certain point. I'm very happy to work with him. However, our law is such that we are not allowed to inject anything into the subsurface. So we're not allowed to store natural gas, and we're not allowed to inject CO2. Maybe this will change, but I think there is a lot of common ground. I'm always very happy to cooperate with Slovenia, to basically share the knowledge, maybe to have interconnection between Norway and Slovenia in the company as well, when let's say the law will be such that it will be possible to do so.
Sorry, I will insist on another part of the question. I think that I didn't clarify enough what is my worries. Do you have any connection with other Slovenians? For instance, you mentioned different countries where you are working, Argentina or Brazil, or I think I mentioned only two. Huh? But do you have any connection with the Slovenes outside of Slovenia, with Slovenian community, with Slovenian professionals and so on?
Yes, I've recently started a little meetings in Stavanger. There's a woman who has been there for over 10 years. Then there is another guy who's been there for less than a year, and I don't think he's going to stay. And then there we have a new very superstar football player, but he hadn't replied yet. So we meet from time to time. We're happy to speak in Slovene, that we don't forget it, because this also happens when you live abroad for long enough. But in Scandinavia, we are very sparse, so there's not that many of us, let's say.
But this was actually the second part that we wanted to go to talk about the Slovenian communities, if you have any contact in Norway with them. that you already respond. But my question I'm adding, do you have any Slovenes living abroad that they are chemical engineers or reservoir engineers? Do you know any of those professionals on the same field that they work abroad?
Yes, I know one of them is my former colleague from high school. I know her very well. She lives in Vienna. She's also a reservoir engineer. And then this another woman that I know from Stavanger, she's also a chemical engineer, now studying software programming. But a lot of these meetings happen over the internet, and this became very popular over COVID time. But I think now that things are starting to open again, people prefer to meet in face to face. I live in a relatively small city, so that's a bit limited.
Do you exchange professional experience? Do you cooperate in some kind of projects? Do you try to involve some kind of projects together? Are you planning
Yes. So first of all, no, I'm not cooperating. So from professional point of view, I'm not cooperating in any projects with other Slovenes. From my knowledge, there is no other Slovenes in this company that I work for. I know someone who is married to a Slovene, but no one who's really Slovene. And I'm also not allowed to speak about the things that I work outside of my job. So I can say very conceptually, but you probably notice I didn't say the company name. I didn't say the name of the fields that I'm working on. So it has to be on such a conceptual way. Yeah.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Carmen Špiljak asked that also Mr. Šale mentioned. What do you see as a major issue that engineering will face in the next 20, 30 years?
Sorry, what is the challenge? What kind of engineers are going to face?
What do you see as major issue that engineering will face in the next 20, so 30 years to come?
So I think that engineering is not really going to have a lot of challenges. It's a good question. It's a difficult question, but we are going to have to change. So I think we're going to maybe that's the case for everyone. So once we finish university, we know certain things and we enter the workforce. And after a certain period of time, we become rusty. So for example, for me, I have very basic knowledge of programming. And I can see that the newer and newer generations, they're skilled when they come out of university. So we are going to, I think programming is one of the things that are going to be so prevalent as is English now. So for example, if I look at my older colleagues in the field, there were some that didn't speak English, they spoke just German. And they thought, well, English, yeah, I didn't need it. And maybe I think about programming in such a way now, maybe I need programming, but I think in the future, we will have to further invest in that. And then there's also another thing that I also noticed that in the past, the engineers, or let's say scientists, were someone that were maybe considered to be in the lab and produce some results and maybe communicating some scientific articles that no one reads. Now, also with the COVID crisis, I think the scientists are the people and engineers as well that people listen to and they trust perhaps more than politicians. So I think we're going to have to brush up on our soft skills and presentation skills as well.
Yeah, very good point. Alexandri just added that he was also looking for Slovenes in south of Sweden and no luck there finding them yet.
I know the pain.
So if anyone has any other comments and questions, now is the time because we're gonna soon go to second part. And Eva, we were talking about Slovene communities in Norway. But in one of the interviews, you mentioned that you came close to some fishermen. So that he's kind of living on a boat, or is it experience more that you would like to meet him more personally?
Yeah. Well, I'm super fascinated about this man, but I haven't met him yet. So he made an interview in on the Slovenian radio. He was he's from Slovenia, but at the time he lived at the coast, although he's not from the coast. He worked in hotels, and he met a Norwegian woman who lives at the top of Norway, close to the Russian border, really at the very north, where really nothing happens. And they were working on these hotels for 10, 12 hours a day. And she told him, but that's no life. Let's do something else. Let's go to my hometown and we will start a life there. And he just said yes. And he had nothing to do with fishing, but there is basically just that in this little village. So he bought himself a fishing boat, and he's fishing alone now in the Barents Sea, and happy there. And I like the way he's got a very good spirit. He said, if you want something, just go for it. Don't be afraid to just go for it. So I hope I will get some time to go and meet him in person and perhaps go fishing with him.
Soon, we'll go fishing together. Let's go a little bit to Slovenia now. So from which city, where you were born? This will be nice to at the beginning.
I am from Ljubljana, born and bred. My father is also from Ljubljana. My mother is from Vipava Valley, from Slap, so from the wine region.
Okay, now I understand. So how many times you go back home and visit your family?
Yeah, this is a good question. So when I was living in Slovenia, I always went to some fancy vacations to see new countries, but now I always go to Slovenia for my vacations. I go maybe twice a year now.
It's close by. So as Mr. Šale mentioned, the promotion of Slovenian language. So you were actually the main initiator for adding Slovene language in Duolingo application, worldwide known application. How you came up with this idea, and how is the process working going on, and when will we be able to start using it?
Yeah. So in fact, I probably wasn't the first one, but I was maybe the most persistent one. So there were other initiatives before to add Slovene on Duolingo. If you look at the internet, Duolingo forums, they were making Facebook groups and there was even petition and so. But unfortunately, Duolingo didn't really respond to these initiatives. And then I applied as well on their official webpage. And this was for personal reasons, because my boyfriend Nico is German and he wants to learn Slovene. I learned German a bit at school, and then I also finished this Duolingo course, and this helped me quite a lot. But German is not that difficult to learn because there's a lot of material. The Slovene is not such a case. It's very difficult to find material. It's available, but it's very limited. So I came up with the idea that we will make this Slovene, and my boyfriend will learn Slovene, and we will speak Slovene at home, and so. But then I applied, and nothing really happened. But by chance, because I'm part of also the Slovenes educated abroad, I don't know if you know this network, it's called UTIS. Yeah, so Association Abroad of Educated Slovenes. I recommend to everyone to join. And there is a man, Boštjan, who works there at Duolingo in the US. So then I asked him, okay, I submitted this application, nothing happens. Can you ask what's going on and so on? And then he said, okay, we just need enough volunteers. So there's like 4 types of people, of volunteers who would make this course. And this will take about a year. And then we, together with the Slovenes Abroad Association, we prepared a survey. So this was me, Manca, Kristi, and Boštjan. We prepared a survey. And in 3 days, this was completed by almost 1,000 people, of which 600 people wanted to be volunteers. Just to give you a comparison, this course can be done with 8 people, but we got 600 volunteers. And the response was also very successful because a lot of people shared it. There was a lot of people who wanted to see Slovene and learn it. It was shared also by official institutions, Embassy of Slovenia in Madrid, Embassy of Slovenia in Britain, Government Office for Slovenia Abroad. So then the result of this, let's say, outcome was then this Boštjan, who works for Duolingo in US, he presented internally, and then they decided that they would accept this application. So this was, as you can see, a result of joint effort. And I don't think anything would move with my application. It was really the force of volunteers, no, like Stefan said before. So the next step is to sign a memorandum of understanding between Duolingo and Slovene educated abroad. And then after this memorandum is signed, approximately 1 year it would take that we create this, let's say, first generation course.
Yeah, that would help a lot because Duolingo is for our best application to learn languages. And you know that Google Translator doesn't translate as perfect as would Duolingo. So I can imagine why so many volunteers wanted to join this workforce because it's a very successful application. So yeah, most of luck in this field, and I hope you can help promoting Slovene. And for sure, we're gonna not publish, but we're gonna help to spread around and make sure that everyone is on it. So your future plans, eventually, one day you're gonna go back to Slovenia. But with all your working skills and knowledge and experience that you gain working abroad and studying and working abroad, how you think you can contribute with all that on Slovenian market?
Yeah, that's a bit of a challenging one. So I see two opportunities here. One is that I would work, I would work with, let's say, my technical knowledge in case there is, for example, opportunity for carbon capture storage project or anything to do with the reservoirs that we have. On the other hand, I know quite a bit about the industry now already, and also about the strategy. So probably in the further years, I will go into the strategy in our company. So this would be in Slovenia, I could then probably also define the strategy for, let's say, energy transition and similar positions. So these two opportunities I see, for example, for some consulting and so. On the other hand, the reason why I would like to go back to Slovenia, it's because of my roots. So my boyfriend and I, we have been to Slovenia quite a lot, and it's not a surprise. A lot of foreigners, when they come to Slovenia, they're completely over the moon. They love it, and he would also see himself living there. As I mentioned before, my mom comes from Vipava Valley, which is a wine region. And I spent a lot of my childhood vacations there with my nonna, and I have very good memories. But I ended up completely somewhere else. My boyfriend also comes from a wine region here in Pfalz, Palatine, and shares a similar story, but he ended up completely somewhere else. He works in finance. It would be very nice to have a business for ourselves, that we do the work we enjoy, because currently we usually go to the office and look at the laptop the whole day. Working with nature is something that both of us love, and it would be, let's say, a step away from this artificial office environment. Also, my job requires me to travel in 4-year segments. So I'm an expat and I'm on a certain position for 4 years, and I don't have that much freedom to decide where to go. So when you have a family, your job is defining how you're going to live your life. And maybe that's good when you're single, but that's not so good when you have kids and your kids have friends and your job is more important than them. So we decided to dedicate our free time. So we're currently both on vacation, but we're working more than we worked before. So we're working 12 hours a day. We're helping at the winery here. We found a very good mentor here in Germany. He's a biodynamic, so very bio. His name is Sven Leiner, and yeah, so we work the whole day in the vineyard and afterwards in the cellar. And afterwards, we always have a nice dinner and try different wines. So if I wasn't here presenting, I would probably be eating and drinking wine with them. Yeah, and we plan to do our first vintage in Slovenia next year, if it's going to work out. A rather small size. We work with maybe 1 or 2 hectares, and then let's see how it goes. So for the next year, I'm still in Norway, and we will try to make this on a distance, our first vintage.
Yeah. So you go from Pfalz to Vipavo, from Riesling to all kind of Mediterranean wines. This is a very nice story. So we're gonna wrap it up just by maybe a few comments on what are the common thing that Norwegian and Slovene has. Like we both know that this is called sports. They're all great athletes and handball players and winter jumpers. Did you ever went to all the winter jumps in, I think there's many of them in Norway, but I think one specifically is in Oslo, very nice one. Have you ever been to these areas?
No, I didn't have I didn't really go. So I'm not very close to the ski jumping, but ski flying places. But Norwegians are very, very sporty. Also, Slovenes are very sporty, but Norwegians are super sporty. So if you see, for example, sometimes I walk along the beach, and sometimes you see a man with a car tire, and he's dragging it on the back. And they're running, and I thought that there's something wrong with this guy, but he was just practicing to go with the sleighs. You see people going in the middle of the winter, they go to fjord to swim. They're quite hardcore. Also my colleague, a very nice woman with a family, and so when she was younger, she went with 20 girlfriends. They crossed Greenland and such stories. They're very, very extreme, very sporty. And they know Slovenes because of the handball, and of course they know Planica, and they know ski jumpers, so they know we are a skiing nation.
So your next project, you don't know yet where you're going to be transferred. This is not, you only know a few months before. How is this organizing all your movement and?
Yes, I can apply to different positions, but I think I will go to some, let's say, strategy-based position that will be then in Germany. Yeah.
Go back to Germany. Okay, thank you, Eva. We're gonna see if there are any more comments here. Alexandri is saying that maybe German can be primary language, and then they could help to learn Slovene. Can't tell because I never learned German, but yeah, it's difficult as it is Slovene as well. So I'm gonna invite people to comment or to make any questions, comments for the end. If not, we're gonna finish right now. Okay, Alexandri?
Yeah, I was thinking about what Stefan Schaller said about the community of Slovenes, and I've tried myself to find some Slovene people here in south of Sweden, and I couldn't. And what happens is that sometimes I need to, there are some open position here in where I work, and I do not have basically anyone to send this. I do not know people Slovene working as engineers, especially outside of Slovenia. So maybe it would be interesting to have this kind of Slovene community, maybe even focusing on engineering, that at least because it's my area of work, so we can share this kind of opportunities around the world. I think it would be interesting.
Yeah, I agree with you, and good news, there is something like that already. So there is this Slovenes educated abroad. So it's a community of basically all Slovene-speaking people that have studied abroad. I think you would fall into this very quickly. You can just join us. I will send you the link, and then we chat in different channels. So one channel is job opportunities. So people are posting, for example, if they see an opportunity, and they can, you basically post and you can see what's open, and then you have a personal connection there. We also, so I'm also organizing a meeting in Denmark at the embassy. I don't know if you would want to come. If you're south of Sweden, you're not that far away.
Copenhagen?
In Copenhagen, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So it will be in 1 month.
Send me the link, please.
Yes,
send me the
okay, very
information.
warmly welcome. Then you will see some people live. Otherwise, we're quite active on this Slack chat. So we are basically organized per countries, but also per professions. So you can chat with engineers around the world or with people in Sweden. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'm interested in this Slack chat as well.
Yeah, okay, then I will post you. Yeah, can you add me on LinkedIn or somewhere and I will just post you. Or anyone who's interested to talk to me, just add me on LinkedIn and I would be very happy to have more contacts. And I'm super happy to meet someone from Sweden. There's very few of us.
Are you in Malmo?
He's from Brazil, but he's in Sweden, you know. So, from Rio.
From Rio.
Miss Wanda is our honorary consul in Rio de Janeiro. So we're close by. But Chandri, which city you are? In Malmo?
I am working and living in Lund. It's close to Malmo, but it's in Lund.
Okay. Just the tunnel and in your Copenhagen.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I was there last weekend, by the way.
Yeah, but as Eva said, Dustotis and also ASEF, the American Slovenian Fund Education, they're very active, they're very successful. So I'm going to send all the links, all the contacts to all the participants today. So you can contact Eva anytime you want. And thank you very much again for joining us today and have a great weekend. Maybe one more comment. Okay. So we see you again next month and all stay well, healthy, and thank you for coming. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for coming and have a great afternoon.
Thank you,
Ciao.
Eva.